Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Harlem.
Thank you.
I've lived here all my life, and I'm happy to see you in this space. Sorry for the noise outside, but I wanted to welcome you here to the Harlem Business Alliance. We felt that it was very important that we get involved in advocating for the most harmed individuals, the most harmed communities around the state, because we knew that if we didn't, they wouldn't have a fair share or a fair chance of getting into this industry. So I appreciate the work that Franklin and the Cannabis Association of New York is doing, and Community Board 10. Community Board 10 is Harlem's community board. And they also felt that it was critically important that we have most harmed individuals involved in this space. So as a Black community, we felt the harm here in Harlem. We still are suffering from the harm. And it's critically important that we have as many Black entrepreneurs as we can possibly grow out of this industry. So we welcome you. Please learn, take everything that you possibly can from this experience, from this workshop, network. Come to the Harlem Business Alliance, speak to your legislators about providing the funding that you need to start and grow your business. We need you desperately. Thanks again.
Thank you. That was powerfully said, and very, very much necessary to be heard and documented in this time. And I'd like to also just point out that it is Black History Month, and that it's rare in this industry that you see all Black and people of color cultivators presented as experts on a subject matter in this industry and across many industries, but especially in the cannabis industry as it exists currently. So I want to give yourself credits for also being a part of this as we all come together and proceed with our conversation. Session 2. So we're going to talk about environmental controls, light quality and quantity, air temperature, humidity, velocity, vapor pressure deficit, and CO2, root zone temperature, moisture, pH, and EC. We're going to talk about post-harvest science around drying, curing, and cold storage. So in the top circle, we have like light quality, quantity, indoor and outdoor, greenhouse. No matter where you're growing at, you have light quality and quantity issues that you need to be concerned about. Even growing indoors, like in a tent, if you get a light leak, you're gonna give your plant light stress. That could cause the monoecious feature where you'll get a male flower that comes out and pollinates your female flowers. Other issues around having too much light or too little light, all these things will intersect with your temperature, humidity, the vapor pressure, and your dew point. So if you have extremely hot lights and it gets cool really, really fast because of your environment, now all of this humidity that's in the air is now sitting on the leaves and turns into powdery mildew, or at least provides an opportunity for something advantageous to take advantage of your plants. You end up with disease in that cross section. And then the other thing you want to think about is what's happening in your substrate. A lot of people don't realize that they have problems from overwatering and different things like that, or underwatering, or having drought periods in between, or pH is too high and certain nutrients are not available readily at that particular pH, given the plant's life cycle, et cetera. So different things to think about how your 3 different environments in the root zone, the air temperature, and the light intersect with each other in the forms of deficiencies, pests, and disease when you have a plant that's not in with the center, its balance, or optimal health. Leaf stomata and vapor pressure deficit, it's a real big buzzword right now, but ultimately the humidity and temperature of the air at different temperatures, the air can hold a different amount of water. Your leaves have a stomata, a little small opening that lets them breathe and let off some H2O and take in CO2. So with those stomata, you want to have them open, but if it's too arid and dry, they may be losing too much water too fast. And if it's too humid, they may close up, and you may find a plant that's perfectly watered, but it's wilting because it's not in its vapor pressure deficit area where it can pull the water through the plant. So things to think about with substrates. believe it or not, substrates themselves can be a rabbit hole you could dive down and never come out of. The way people fall in love with living soil or other substrates, but things change from time to time, and you need to be able to like at least quantify what you're looking for in your water holding capacity, electrical conductivity of the plant, meaning where you're gonna have cation action with the roots, pH, and your, let me come back a little bit, what's my last one? Oh, and runoff. So after you reach your water holding capacity, you get to a point where there's a runoff. Everyone's done it at home, and you have to go run and grab a towel because you water plants and it's leaking all over something that you don't want water on. But with that runoff in agricultural uses, you'll measure it sometimes to get a comparison between the water that's going in versus the water that's going through the media and then what's coming out at the end. So we'll talk some more about that. At the end, we've produced a number of, if you've grown your plant successfully, you've produced a number of different cannabinoids and phytochemicals that we talked about earlier. And a lot of people talk about full spectrum as the entourage effect of all these compounds together and at different concentrations, or think of it like different recipes. And that one person makes chicken this way, another person makes chicken that way.
I thought I was bugging.
And the same plant, the same cultivar grown in two different environments or with two different, nutrient regimens, et cetera, may taste and express themselves completely different. Many of the molecules that we associate with aroma, which we call flavor, but it's actually mostly happening in our nose, is those molecules are highly combustive and volatile. So when they start to get warm above 65 degrees, they'll start to off gas. And so knowing that, you want to think about how we're going to preserve the freshness of that product for the end user so they have that experience that the person who grew it actually had. Because we know that like with a bad supply chain, people are getting a lot of dry, stale things that probably were really awesome 6 months ago, 2 years ago when it was actually grown or whatever. at the rate that we're getting these stores opened up at. But thank God for the ones we have. But here we get to start leading the conversation about what we want our supply chain to look like. And do we want cold supply chain throughout to really preserve the freshness and the quality and character? Because it's not just the percentage of THC. It really is about the whole experience. So along post-harvest science, we'll talk about drying, which is the slow removal of water from the flower material. And you want to get to a low enough point where you don't get mold or mildew, but that the product is still fresh and not overly dry and brittle. Cool temperature so that we can preserve those aromatic volatiles that we talked about. And then incorporating cold supply chain in the storage and transportation of cannabis to the end user so that they get the freshest representative product. The Dank Duchess is an international hashish consultant and cannabis cultivator. She's a public speaking, she does public speaking and uses all media to spread the word of psychedelic wellness globally. And I'm gonna go off script and just say that she's one of my favorite people to hang out with and be around in the times that we've just run into each other and then continue to build our relationship over time. Just always quality and always ooh la la.
Oh, for Frenchie.
Yeah. Me and Tone became friends at Stravinsky's birthday party, and we've just found that like over time, our experience in cannabis and experience in music have overlapped in a lot of different ways that we're surprised we didn't meet each other sooner. But here we are now, as every time we get together, we have amazing talks about cultivation and cannabis. He was one of the original, he was a part of Original Flavor, who was affiliated with Rockefeller Record in its early days. Also worked at Rockaware, and he's got 18 plus years of cannabis cultivation and experience. And he and I are thinking about doing a podcast called Higher Frequency, coming soon.
Well said.
We have Jesce Horton, CEO and founder of not Loud Record.
Maybe coming soon. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. I'm gonna pull y'all in.
I'll be here. I got the mics already. We're mic'd up. But yeah, CEO and founder of Loud, and experienced professional entrepreneur and amazing engineer, and his facility designs kind of speak for themselves. I found out about you through Instagram, but then your curing room was one of the things that I was like, me and this dude got to talk. And so tell people a little bit more about yourself, because.
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, a cultivator, but I also focused a lot on the nonprofit sector and kind of making sure that more Black and brown people have a piece of the cannabis industry through co-founding Minority Cannabis Business Association, and also now New Leaf Project, which in combination with the city of Portland cannabis taxes, other businesses like Cookies Wild, Hawthorne Gardening, we've now granted and loaned over $2 million to Black and brown businesses, specifically in the cannabis industry, and have continued to grow that with other state contracts since then. But primarily, like you said, the cure room, thank you. But I'm a weed head, so that's primarily why I'm in this industry, is because I truly love cannabis, love premium cannabis, and the ability to really get the best expression out of each cultivar is kind of why I'm in it and why I love it.
Right. Cool, let's start. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your growing environment first and how you like to monitor your environment. Anybody from any aspect?
Yeah, I remember one time I was given a tour in my facility, and I asked one of my cultivators, how many variables do you think are in this room at any given time? And I'm thinking that he's gonna say, something crazy like 100,000 or 200,000 different variables and potential situations that can be happening. But what he said was actually kind of blew my mind, and it's true, is there's infinite amount of variables in the cultivation space at any given time. This variable changes, this one changes, right? They're all interlocking, and therefore monitoring and understanding what's happening in that facility is critical if you're going to get the best out of each cultivar. And I don't think that you have to have really specialized equipment. There's a lot of companies out there that are producing, kind of all-encompassing ways of bringing in data and kind of manipulating that and learning what's happening. But you can do that, and you can go with, a really complex system, and I don't disagree with that. But you can go all the way with, individual monitors, something basic that's coming off of Amazon, right? These monitors that kind of tell over Bluetooth. They're not always quite as accurate, but you need to be getting data. You need to always be monitoring what's happening, and that's the key to having the best facility. So again, I think there's really complex ways of pulling in all this data into one HMI, human machine interface, where you can really look at it. And I think there's, very simple ways. And I think no matter what, you've got to implement one of the two or something in between if you're going to really be learning, each harvest. And you've got to learn, you've got to do better and better. Is kind of the key to successful growth.
That push sensor is the one that I use.
I love push sensors.
And it's like $49, and I think if you want the Wi-Fi one, it's like $89, and it'll send you a signal to your phone, even if you're not in the grow facility. And it's less than you spend on a pair of shoes and a nice pair of socks. So it's, and like you can have more than one sensor in a space. You might want to check out the different zones. It depends on how much information you want to get, but there's a lot of cheap and easy accessible sensor and data loggers that are available on the market, and whether you want it to be Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or go into an iPad that you just keep Velcro to the wall. I fell in love with measuring everything, and it was over after that. But before I had that, I also kind of learned, some basic, thermometer, hygrometer stuff, and learn how to feel and pay attention and listen to the plants. And that's some of the art side of it, as well as the science. And, the data without good observations or intuitions also could leave you off in left field.
Once you get good, most growers will walk into a grow room and tell whether something is off, right? It's like, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the plant's like this. So there's definitely an art to it as well, but you can back it up, right, with the data and confirm it with the data.
So on a complete opposite side in terms of scale, I'm mostly on the home grow. So I've grown intense for just about 20 years. And so I want to stress, as a hash maker, precision is important to me, right? So you want to have the ability to know everything in your garden. At the same time, you don't want to be so overwhelmed with the amount of things that the average person would have to, in a way, make to that learning curve, that I think is really important to understand that you can understand this plant with understanding the temperature, the humidity, and making sure your lights are right. You know what I mean? There are many apps that you can have right now that will teach you about your light at the leaf surface and such like that. I happen to really, and I agree so much with Jesse on the fact that you can walk into a room and then you can feel it. Like if it's uncomfortable for you, it's definitely uncomfortable for the plants. The plants are definitely unhappy about it. And you can see how the plant, I guess I came from a situation where I didn't have an opportunity to like learn in a facility. I was doing closet grows underground in Florida in the early 2000s. So it was really like real hush hush. And what I had to understand is, what does the plant say to me? Because I have to feel, as some of my family's from Panama, a lot of us still definitely live in the bush. They don't have access to any push sensors, but they know if the plants are doing well. And the plant speaks to you. You look at the plant, how it's growing, and you pay attention. At no point is this a set it and forget it. You can have it as, like he's saying, you can have it Bluetooth, you're not in the garden, but best believe he's in the garden all the time. You know what I'm saying? So that you can make those changes and understand what your plant is saying. So from on this side, I'm saying that like the science super matters. I want to encourage people to understand that they can be in tune with that plant after just a fairly short time, to understand that the plant is saying particular things and understand what to do about it.
You definitely want to learn the language of the plant. Plants talk. And I was talking to my friend outside, like, patience is going to teach you the language of the plant. You know what I mean? You sit there, like, I was self-taught in '05. Like, I had a little raggedy book, How to Grow Weed, from the 70s that my friend gave me. And I was so dedicated. Before I planted my first seed, I studied the book back and forward and had my friend quiz me before I even planted my first seed. So, because it was like, this shit has to work, this has to work. So I had to, I was a very impatient person before that. And me sitting there watching the plants grow was like, taught me patience, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't see no results until I left and came back. And then it was like, oh, it grew like 5 inches, you know what I mean? But in the process of sitting there in stillness and watching things, your body is learning the environment of when the plants are growing good. So now, like he said, I could walk in my room and be like, it's too dry in here. Yep. It's too humid in here, without even looking at the thermometer. You know what I'm saying? And they was just talking about the
app, yeah.
The app.
Sensors, yeah.
And I'm like sitting here kicking myself because I'm 18 years in this, and I just had like a disaster 2 weeks ago when I went to Boston for one day and my air conditioner broke. Had I had that, I could have called one of my bros and been like, yo, go check that. You know what I mean? One day with enough powerful lights and your AC goes wrong and your whole thing is wiped out. I wanted to cry. It was like my kids died. You know what I mean? And it feels like that because when you plant a seed, it's like you're watching that seed grow. Even when I have plants that I'm like, this is not a keeper. Because I grew it from seed, I can't kill it. I have my brother like, go kill that plant with me. You know what I'm saying? Because I grew it from seed. So it's like a personal attachment, and it lends me to say that everybody that want to get in this business, like, if you don't have that type of inner passion for it, if it's just about a buck or just to have something to smoke, then start small and don't try to go too big, and just keep it personal. Because if you go too big and you put too much money out and then things go left, you got to pay rent, you might be homeless. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you just got to pace yourself, learn the plant, have a passion for it. If you ain't got the passion for it, find something that you have a passion for, because that's what the only thing that's gonna work in your life is things that you have a passion for. Mm-hmm. So,
speak.
I land my plane.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason why all of us are here today is this passion that you do like find through this communing with this plant that's special. And I have to say that there's definitely like I said, through the pandemic, that was my happy place. You know what I'm saying? That was like my therapeutic thing that I could do. And we were talking about how sometimes you don't want to be around people.
Word. Most plant people don't.
You know, I think that plant people are a little different. You know what I'm saying? And cannabis plant people are really special. I have a preference. I'm biased. Yeah. But with that, so we talked about environment. We talked a little bit about controls. What are some of the things that you do control, and like how do you control them? Like you talked about the air conditioner system. What other things do people need to think about that are going to be investments when you go down this road?
Humidity, dehumidifier, invest in one, especially if you got a little tent. Whether you got a tent or you got a grower, you want to at least have a little dehumidifier if you got a tent, and maybe a few dehumidifiers if you got a big space. You don't want your plants to be consistently saturated when they're budding, because you can get bud rot, you can get powdery mildew. It could affect your quality. It can affect your overall yield. And you'll feel like it'll go from beautiful plants to right at the time when they're starting to bud and take off, they can just go left real quick because you overlooked the dehumidification, CO2. If you don't got no plants breathe in CO2 and breathe out oxygen. We breathe out CO2. It's like a exchange. So if that's natural cycle of life. Without plants on this earth, we can't live because they provide oxygen. So if we got them in an enclosed and they don't have no CO2, they won't deliver for you. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't got no type of CO2 situation, or you're not in the room all the time with them, or then your plants won't deliver for you. So those are two little things that I could, off the top of my head, that you definitely want to keep your eye open for at all times.
Do you use a CO2 monitor?
Me personally, yes. I have a CO2 generator and a monitor. You got simple CO2 generators that's like baking soda and a jug with little things, that naturally give off CO2, or you got your CO2 generator that you could connect to either a propane tank, which can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, and if it's not hooked up right, or you could have it hooked to some type of gas line. It's connected to a meter that you set the amount of CO2 that you want in the room. No more than like 1,500 tops. I stay around 10 to 12 just to be on the safe side, because 400 is the natural, 350, 400 is the natural CO2 in the environment. So anything over that is giving them supplement extra. So you're gonna help, but you don't wanna, growing all of these years, even just as of late, I'm starting to learn that sometimes if you give them too much CO2, trying to make them get too big, you could lose in quality because you're trying to chase weight. You know what I'm saying? But that's still kind of controversial. The jury's still out, you know what I mean? So these are things that you're always learning. Even though, like I said, I've been doing this 18 years, I'm still a student, you know what I'm saying? So it just goes on and on. But you might want to add something to that.
He's speaking some truth. That's the best growers they kind of operate by the phrase, "What the wise man knows that he knows nothing at all," and they're constantly trying to improve. The best growers are usually not very boisterous, you know, they're not extremely confident. The life of a grower is almost like a tortured soul, you know, it's like they're never really happy, you know, it's the best growers because they know that there's potentially something that's coming around, right? It's a perpetual, it's all year, you know, you can't let off. So you might have a great situation that happens, but every good grower has had a great situation and then the next harvest has something that happened horribly. So they never really let themselves get too high. But to the question, and discipline as well, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I was never patient as well. Growing has taught me so much patience. I've learned so many life lessons in the grow room that have helped me to become a better person in so many ways. So that's truth. But as far as like what I measure more, definitely you know, one of the common ideas is more light and you're gonna have bigger buds. And that's, you know, usually you go into a cultivation space, I do in consulting across the country, and that's one of the things I see most often is that they're just pouring light onto these plants when, you know, really less in many cases is more. You know, in many of my cultivation spaces, I'm not operating at the highest percentage. I'm operating somewhere 50, 60%, because if you've got all these other things in line working together, and it also depends on the cultivar, then you can get a lot out of these plants, especially better quality when you're not pouring heavy light on them. So I think making sure that you have a par meter that is, you know, measuring the quality of the light and the spectrum of that light to know whether or not your plants really need, right, what those lights are giving it, but also a PPFD meter, which is going to determine the intensity of that light, right? And how really, that's the key, is the PPFD, because you're going to trust the spectrum a lot in the lights if you believe in the lights, but determining what PPFD your plants want will help you determine how high to put those lights. And a lot of times it's not nearly as close as people think. So PPFD is telling you at that canopy level what that light intensity is, but then you also are able to measure that as you're going down the plant to really get an idea. If you have an excellent harvest, you certainly want to know what that PPFD was. You want to know what those variables were, right, that helped you to get there so that you can improve upon that each and every time.
I would add to that. So yes, the PPFD, and then PPFD and CO2 will bump up against each other. And that when you get extreme high levels of light intensity is when CO2 becomes your limiting factor.
Right.
And so you have to add CO2, otherwise you can't go no more. Right. You can't feed it anymore. You can't water it anymore. The CO2 becomes the only limiting factor. And if you think about when people are talking about carbon weight or biomass, that's that carbon. And so knowing that, there's also a study that you were talking about, and they actually talk about dilution, and that bigger buds, and you know what I'm saying, you actually do dilute the amount of THC. You get a bunch of biomass, but you get less THC. And you know,
That's still kind
less
of
trichome coverage.
well, I mean, there's been a study.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying,
right.
a
It's
study.
still kind of controversial.
I would stamp that, man. The more a lot of people push that higher weight by increasing the temperature and then increasing the CO2 and kind of accelerating the growth of a plant. But everyone that I know that increases that toward the end, they lose something in the quality and the trichome coverage and the visuals and the aesthetics.
As a bunch of weed heads, like some of my best weed that I've smoked has been small, dense-ish, kind of well-formed nugs, not big, gigantic spearheads. You know what I'm saying? Not that some of those aren't great too, and it really depends on the genetics of the plant.
Or how it's been grown, because outdoors
Yeah.
is obviously going to make, you know,
Bigger
buds that are
Yeah.
ideal for hash making. So I like that.
Yeah, totally.
And such like that. You know, in my grow, I am, of course, because I am limited by size, I am really caring that I'm going to get the yield that I need to get. So I want everything about the plant to be right. I am looking at the vapor pressure, I'm looking at the temperature, and hash makers right now are circulating these specs about our ideal temperature and humidity through all the weeks to be able to get the ideal trichome production. Because for us, it's not about biomass. It's really all about the trichome coverage and getting the densest amount of trichomes with the fullest heads. And of course, so I'm looking at light also because as a limiting factor for the fact that I'm in a tent, you know, I do happen to have good lights. So my good lights are air cooled from the top, so I don't have that heat issue. But the average person is going to have to be worried about that. And heat being a big thing. And I have CO2 coming in, not with propane. That sounds very scary, but I do understand how that works. But with, you know, a natural system with mushrooms, so exhale bags, you have enough of those, you can really bump up your CO2. But like you said, I'm not looking for biomass. I'm looking for trichome production only.
Yeah. I think that's a wonderful segue into like post-harvest drying, curing, and hash making, as well as cold storage and cold transportation to and from, you know, dispensaries, and also when you're rolling around with your weed, how to keep it fresh.
You could do everything right from seed to the cut down, and then your end result could taste and smell like hay.
Destroy
if
it.
you don't dry it in proper humidity and proper temperature. Preferably 60 to 70. Some people go to 55. That's, you know, but I personally, I stay in that between 60 and 70 as far as temps, and 55, 60 maybe the first day, but then I make sure the second, third day I'm dropping down, and then I try to stay in that 55, 50 caliber and do the slower to dry, the better, because you keeping all your smells and your flavors in check by the time you put it in the bag. Then when you put it in the bag, you're gonna make sure you store those bags or the compartments in a cool environment. Not too dry, not too moist, and get it out of there as soon as possible. You wanna, but yeah, because by the time as a grower, you wanna pass it off, you wanna know that when you passing it off, it smells and smokes amazing. So even after it dries and you bag it up, if you have time, you wanna cure it for like at least 2 weeks, preferably a month. But I know some of us gotta pay bills and we got orders on the deck. So, you know, but the better to dry and cure, that if you don't dry and cure it right, all that work, watering, all it goes down the drain.
To add to that as well, if you're selling for that premium quality, the trim job, you know, having people that are either, you know, beating up your buds and shaving your buds or leaving a lot of leaves on, you know, that can easily, when people buy bud, and this is in the legal market and the traditional market, when they look at your bud, first thing they're trying to do is take percentages off. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, look at that, oh, it's a little bit there, 10%. You know what I mean? They go back in and smell it again, and they're like, that's another 10%. You know what I mean? So you really want to make sure that appearance is at that peak level, because you really are protecting a lot of margin and a lot of sales opportunities if you're making sure that you're doing those steps correctly.
And even though you can vacuum seal something, even plastic has tiny holes in it, and cannabis suffers from oxidation. And so what was light green today will oxidize and be
Yellow,
khaki greenish, brownish over time.
I want to speak to that look thing, the presentation of the look. A lot of us lately have been getting highly tricked by the look. There's I've been to a lot of dispensaries, and I'm not gonna say no names, and I've purchased some expensive, beautiful looking weed, and by the time I smoked it, it was like, you can have that. And I've smoked some weed that didn't look as beautiful, but smelled amazing and smoked smooth. There's 2 different types of cough. There's your throat cough, which means you're smoking some harsh weed that if you're not a connoisseur, you don't know the difference. You think you're smoking some powerful shit, but, powerful medication. But as you smoke on it long enough, you'll realize this is just some not curated weed at the end of the day. It wasn't grown with the love. And the high is like bland versus something that may not be as pretty, but it was cured perfectly, and it just goes, that lung cough Well, that chest expansion cough is when you know the THC is going straight to the blood,
blow it out. You gotta
straight to the brain, and it's gonna
let them out.
right. And that's the high you want. The lung cough, not the throat cough. The lung cough is gonna let you know you got some real good potency. The throat cough is like, I got some harsh, no love weed. You know what I mean? And a lot of the pretty weed, and I gotta blame a lot of that because the salt fertilizers kind of enhance the trichomes a little bit more than the organics, so to speak. You know what I mean? That jury for me is still out too, because I'm on a never-ending quest to make the organics look as beautiful as the salt fertilizers. But that's less like your fruits and vegetables in your supermarket. You know, you go to the organic section of the apples and oranges. They may not be as pretty as the big, beautiful red peppers that's in the regular section, but the nutrition, the flavor, the terpenes in that organic food is 10 times better than what you got in your regular salt fertilizer tomatoes. So what do you want, looks or quality?
Well, they're not mutually exclusive.
They're not. They're
You know
not.
what I'm
But
saying?
you can get a good eye test in general. There's always exceptions.
Okay, so I have a couple of things to say on that, right? So just speaking on organic and inorganic, you know, I think a lot of it has to do with experience. You know, I think that the New York market, and not just the New York market, a lot of markets have found that like pushing plants out as fast as possible, a lot of people are using salts, but you go over to California, and especially if you go into Mendo and you go to Humboldt or you know, in the Bay, and people are either growing outdoors or growing indoors, you will find the most beautiful cannabis that is organic. So I think that really there's a learning curve involved with that. And at the same time, the beauty of stuff, you know, a good trim job is aesthetically pleasurable, and a good trim job is indicative that the material was handled well. But for me, as a hash maker, good-looking weed means that it's going to make good hash. At no point is hash going to be treated like trash and gonna make cash. That was back when you could do that with solvent because you were just liquefying all the cannabinoids. But when you're making high quality bubble hash, and then of course going on to making high quality rosin as well, you're looking for the ideal, well-handled plants. And a lot of times, even if you're gonna be doing trim, really good trim, because it has a very good return on investment, if it's been handled really well, like handle it as if you're gonna smoke it, so that it's being preserved after it's been trimmed and touched as little as possible in a really cold environment. Even if you're doing that, you need to understand that like the aesthetics is the indication that the grower and the trimmer and all the handler gave you exactly what you need. So I find that it's easier to become single source, meaning you're the cultivator and you're the hash maker, because there's much less handling in between that situation, and there's less trimming involved as well. So, you know, that's a place where, in terms of pretty and the aesthetics, just to me is indicative of the fact that it was handled well. But you know, it's one thing that people don't talk a lot about with regard to our curing, because I agree with what both these gentlemen have said for sure. You can put in all the effort possible and lose it all when it comes to the drying and the curing. People are doing cryocure now. And cryocure has been around for a little bit, and it's kind of sucked, which is freeze drying flower. But there are a couple of companies that have really dialed in being able to get the plants. This is the idea of putting your wet plants in, and they're frozen, and then water vapor is sucked out of them. And what happens is that the plant looks exactly like it looked when it was in the plant. So we are used to, and I have no problem with that, the plant kind of coming in on itself as it loses some of the water, it contracts. But with properly freeze-dried weed, it doesn't do that at all. But the jury's out with regard to whether the freeze-drying process is most ideal for the consumer, whether it's going to be any degradation. Because I've had some really terrible freeze-dried weed and some phenomenal, like, high-quality freeze-dried weed, and how that's going to affect us in hash. You know, we're all trying to figure that out. So
To your point, I've had some amazing salt fertilizer. Like,
Oh, yeah,
like I've grown for years with salt fertilizer, and you know I've had an amazing crop. So I get. What
And you
you're
have had
saying.
shitty,
Yeah.
organic, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I've done both ways. So I definitely, I'm not. It's just you can screw up an organic crop,
Yes,
and you can
for sure.
screw up a salt
100%.
fertilizer. So it's, you know, it
100%.
all is based on how you treat the plant, the love you give it to it.
And I would say people think that depths all have to be mids,
No.
and that that all outdoor has to be backyard boogie or
Definitely not.
whatever. You know what I'm saying? And it's not the case. It's, you know, plants that are grown well in good balanced environments, in good systems, and people that love and care about them produce quality plants. It might not be for you. It might not be for everybody, which is why we have so much diversity in just the genetics alone. But then at every step of the growth process, there's a ton of different decisions you can make, which is kind of why we're having this conversation, because in the end, like, you know, but as much as we educate other growers, we also educate customers so that they're able to decide what is it worth to you. For, do you really want a $25 eighth? If that means that your farmer just sprayed a field and walked away? Or do you want to pay more and know that it was cared for and loved the same way when you go get your fresh juice in the morning or smoothie, you don't use the pesticide because you know you're just concentrating all those pesticides into your juice, or that you're taking it and concentrating, now you're concentrating all of this pesticide and whatever other adulteration someone may have done to a plant into a product. And so deciding what you want, you know what I mean? A lot of people, it's new for them. There's gonna
And
be a lot of,
educating the customer
Yeah.
also that
Yeah.
just because it's expensive
Doesn't
and
mean-
hype
Yeah.
does not mean that's going to be the ideal thing for your cannabinoid system, or just for a good smoke. You know, you're like, oh my God, this pretty mylar mids. Y'all passed that along.
I can get a good gist of the type of customer I'm dealing with if they're always asking for the hyped strain versus somebody that's asking for the type of high that they're looking for. You know what I'm
Yeah, the
saying?
experience, yeah.
That's when I know I'm dealing with a person, a real connoisseur smoker who just enjoys the plant versus the smoker that just want to smoke what everybody else is smoking. You know what I mean? It's like McDonald's versus or Starbucks versus your favorite boutique coffee shop that everybody waits outside online for because they just something about their coffee. You want to, if you're gonna be small, you want to try to be that person, you know what I'm saying, versus trying to go against Starbucks. Because especially in a place like this, populated city like this, so many people appreciate so many different things. You could find your audience, you could find your niche as long as you grow with love.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have different genetics as well, you know. I
Genetics
think
is key.
that's part of the game that more people are realizing the importance as you have more entrants coming into the market, people that are starting off with really no real strain catalog. And, you know, you're trying to come into the market and you may get some cuts, but you're coming to the market with what everybody has. That's another problem with having the hype is that, you know, if it's too hype and it's been released, then you don't want to go to a dispensary and say, hey, you know, I have this Blue Dream, whatever, Blue Dream, they're gonna automatically, again, 10%, 20%, 30%. Oh, well, somebody else had that, you know, automatically 10% is not as valuable as it was, but rather than you coming with something that you've taken the time to curate, you've maybe even bred yourself, you've pheno hunted, you've you know, really gone out there and found different seeds and found something that you really want that speaks to you, that you believe speaks to the market, that is not flooded. You're going to put yourself in a completely different category when you talk about going out there and having to sell, you know, that cannabis. So having, you know, new genetics, maybe something with a touch of the hype. And I just say this because I'm out here trying to sell, you know, right, in this legal market where, you know, I'm not going out and trying to necessarily sell Gary Payton, but if I can cross Gary Payton with something that I think is worth, and it brings something new to the market, then that's kind of hitting both worlds, right? Where you kind of touch a little bit of the hype, but it's still completely different and something that is your own. That's really where you find that the most value in the market as you're growing.
I would say that also when you go sell something that you're passionate about, that you feel like is a true expression of who you are, it doesn't come off sleazy. Like selling becomes, you're making an offer to somebody. You're offering them the opportunity to go on this ride with you or to be a part of this experience, to bring them into the success that you've been building.
Right.
And, you let, in commerce, we exchange energy for that. You know what I mean? And when you sell somebody something that you schemed on, because you were like, I did Google Analytics, and I found the hypest strain that's gonna be, and I built a hype bot that will make sure that by the time I harvest, the strain will be at its hypest.
Well, that's the other key though, right? Because if you're finding a strain or you want to bring a strain, say someone gives you a clone, it's gonna take you 6 to 8 months, to really get that into the market at a scale where it actually makes sense and you're selling it. So if, you got to be making decisions on what strains you're growing and what strains you're selecting, not based on what's happening now, especially not based on what happened 6 months ago with the strain that you thought. You've got to be ahead of that because, if you got the cut and you're thinking that nobody has it, then somebody else is getting that same cut. And by the time you bring it to the market, you're at a real competitive disadvantage.
Yeah, but a lot of people, when they think about sales, especially farmers and gardeners, people, and they don't think about okay, wait a minute, my sales funnel. And also, the idea for a lot of people, sales seems like a dirty word. But, when you sell something that you're passionate about, you know what I'm saying? I know people that if I give you a call, it was like, yo, I got something, you got to see it.
Yeah.
It's because I'm excited about it, want to share something, not because I'm trying to hustle you out of your money. Which, saying a lot of companies that go into growing cannabis are trying to hustle people out of their money, don't know anything about cannabis, don't care. They Googled what strains to order. They ordered them, they grew them with whatever fertilizer company came and threw the nicest offer in their face or whatever, and they give you, some of those companies are going out of business now or pulling out of certain states now because it wasn't worth it in the end.
Let me say something to that point. I don't know who this might speak to. We may be a little early in the market as we talk about really getting out there and selling and creating that sales funnel and creating loyalty with retailers. But you cannot be going out thinking you're going to sell based on price. Price cannot be the first thing that you're talking about. You can't say, I got this strain at this price, because you're automatically going to be down in what people say is the market price. And that shoots down very quickly. You've got to be selling and creating relationships with your retail partners that are based on value, right? What value can I really bring to you? These new strains that you don't have, this way of cultivating that no one on your shelf is cultivating like that, this community that I can bring to your store. All these different things, you've got to be thinking, how do you help them to differentiate? Because if you're just trying to put weed on the shelf and sell it, then you're going to be kind of coasting downwards with the rest of the market, as all markets do as they get more and more saturated. So you've got to build that into your whole business model.
Race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Yep. Price.
Price, right.
Know your audience. There's people out here that don't mind cheap, a lot of something that's cheap because they like, ooh, I got more to smoke. You know what I mean? But there's people that's like, don't pass me that because that you're disrespecting me. You know what I'm saying? I feel like, you know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm one of those guys. You know what I'm saying? So my friends are those people. So you start out with your friends. You know what I mean? You know, your friends know your taste, you know your friends' taste. So it's like, yo, try this. And then if they be like, yo, what's this? That's all you need. That's the reaction you need. If they be like, like I was saying, then you know you gotta keep working. You know what I mean? I don't even be like, I sneak weed on my friends sometimes. You know what I'm saying? I just be like, pass it to him. Don't even tell him. He thinking it's the same thing until he look back at me and be like,
exactly.
This is something different? And I'll be like, and then you be like, But if he's just like talking and don't give me no reaction, and I'm like, I gotta keep working. You know what I mean? That ain't the one. You know what I'm saying? And then when your people's, because those are your biggest haters too. The closest people are the ones that's looking for you to be like, yo, dog, this is garbage, man. You know what I'm saying? So if you could,
it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun when you just like talking trash about somebody.
Right. So when you can appease your greatest haters, then you know you're ready for the streets. You know what I'm saying? Then you know you're ready for your market. So, yeah, your critics.
We're not haters, we're just
Yeah, that's what.
Right,
exactly.
right.
Right, the
We
connoisseurs.
ain't, man.
Workers have the finest things in the world, so we have high standards.
Ax-
So it's
axolot.
not hating, it's just
You're right. Great.
yeah.
Great. It's not hating.
It feels like hating to us, to growers,
We
right?
love it.
because
We love
To
it.
growers,
the
it feels like
label.
hating.
But when you're real, exactly. When
There
you're
was a
real,
meme.
you know it's just constructive criticism.
There was a meme where it was just like, you know, they have the little cartoon and it's 2 strips and it's like a grower handing some bud or handing some like a bud to his friends. And all is just one scene, he's handing it to him, he's all excited. The next scene, the guy's like, not your best batch. And then the grower's like, oh, like,
Right.
Feels.
But you need that honesty.
And you were talking before about it being a miserable journey sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, because if you knock it out of the park, this run, you always feel like you gotta knock it out of the park even better next run.
Right.
But
Don't work like
but life doesn't work like
Yeah,
that. Nature
right.
doesn't work like that. There's ebbs and flows. And, you know, but if you can measure a little bit, pay attention to what's going on, make sure things don't go off the rails, you'll get back. You'll knock it out of the park again. So,
And as a grower, give yourself some grace because that's like, you know, that's with everything in life. What you describing with your weed, that could be your pot of spaghetti. You know what I'm saying? That could be your fried chicken today. It could be your banging fried chicken today. Tomorrow's fried chicken may need it a little more, you know what I'm saying, Caesar salt. You know what I'm saying? But it's, you know, so you give yourself a little grace. Don't beat yourself up. As long as you ain't got a consistent downward spiral where you just not caring no more and you're not showing it no love because you got too gassed and it's like, oh, I could grow, I could do this, but my eyes closed. That's when you start, you know, feeling yourself too much and then your quality starts to go left. I did that before in like year 3. I did my first 2 years. I just started getting better. Once I had my best crop about year 2.5, I started putting my blindfolders on and working. All of a sudden, my crash, garbage. What is this? I didn't even want to sell it. You know what I mean?
And let's talk about like a tortured life also with growing and growing this plant, but then you got to think about all the other things that go into this business, right? A tortured life when you talk about security and getting robbed, right? I've had that happen where you got the best harvest, you made the most money, and then next harvest you walk in and everything is gone, right? So those types of things that happen, compliance issues that are going to happen with the state, employment issues that are going to happen with you running a crew, marketing, sales. There's a lot of things that go into, you know, cultivation and actually having a successful cultivation business. And if you're going to be responsible for that, you know, you really got to be thinking about all those different areas and what could potentially go wrong, you know, and thinking about that from that angle versus just getting excited.
Speaking on what could go wrong, as you talked about the fact that the market is always going downward, it's important for cultivators to, yes, you want to have your niche, which is cultivation, but always look to branch out onto the next new thing that is going to feed within to your cultivation. So if you're someplace where the price has like taken a nosedive, but concentrates have not taken a nosedive, oh my gosh, you're doing fantastic. You buy all the weed at the cheapest price possible, and then you convert it into concentrates. So you have to be flexible like that because whether you're growing things yourself or you're subject to whatever's happening with the market, you never know what's going to happen with your cultivation. You know, you can grow specifically for concentrates and then something change in your environment and suddenly your weed is just too dense, like too dense to get the yield that you need to get as a hash maker, and now you're just like suddenly you're selling weed instead of making hash. So you got to be really fluid and dynamic when you're dealing with your business.
Indeed. Should we open it up to questions?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's already 1:30.
Hi, this question is for Jesse mainly, but anybody else who can answer. In the introduction, you talked about helping nonprofits get sort of started. How does that work?
Getting a nonprofit started?
Well, no, I know how to get a nonprofit started. I run a
did-
couple of myself, but in terms of getting them started in the industry and the work, specifically what you do with nonprofits to help them in the cannabis industry.
So how to integrate a nonprofit to benefit or to thrive in the cannabis industry? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. You know what? I think, you know, first and foremost, it's about funding, I think, in a lot of ways, right? Having the right funding, and that there's a lot of programs out there that are focused on doing what we're doing, right? Making sure that there's a more space for Black and brown people, making sure that there's more success, making sure they can invest in equipment, making sure they can invest in education. There's a lot of support out there. So I think that's the first thing, is to really get plugged in with the resources that are available for you, and continuing to look for those resources, I think is first. And there will be more as we look towards federal legalization, as New York gets going and more dollars start flowing. I think a nonprofit with the right mission that really serves, a need in the cannabis industry has a great opportunity to pull in funding to help them amplify what they're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope I answered you.
You did.
Okay.
I had a question for, obviously all three of you. CO2 levels you were talking about, so as a technique, you were talking about 15, so I'm guessing 1,500 ppm you're talking about. Do you guys vent your rooms, or do you not vent?
Well, I have a sealed room.
All right, so you don't vent.
I don't vent. Venting is when you need CO2. But if you got a CO2 generator in your room, you can.
You don't want to.
You want it to stay in.
Right, you want it. So basically, the way it works is it goes to a certain level. The CO2 kicks on to a certain level. When it gets to that level, it turns off. The plants eat it up. It drops down to a certain level and kicks back on. So if that answers.
No, but you do greenhouses then?
Yeah, I do both greenhouse and indoor, and there's some requirements to vent when you go to get city and state permits. Sometimes people usually kind of rip that stuff out after they leave. But there is some benefit to bringing in fresh air in indoor greenhouse, but it definitely at night, not when you have your generators going. Your generators won't be operating during the day. And I think in greenhouse, there's a lot of benefit to CO2 supplementation, but you do lose a lot because you're not as sealed as you would be in indoor. So you got to kind of factor that in. But I think CO2 also, really, you get the best benefit from it when everything else is dialed in. If you've got your nutrients dialed in, you've got everything dialed in, that's going to give you that extra boost. But, it's really about making sure everything is dialed in and then giving that boost, no matter whether you're greenhouse or indoor.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Michael with Ravensview Genetics. And in reference to genetics for your grows, do you do in-house R&D, or do you pretty much outsource your genetics from other people?
We do all in-house genetics. There's very rare occasions where we'll bring in a cut or genetics from someone else, just because the risk for bugs. I mean, every time I've ever gotten bugs, I've ever gotten issues has been when I brought in another clone. It hasn't been because people didn't get sprayed down when they walked into my facility, because they didn't step into this mat with the water and all that. It's never really been that. It's been because someone has brought in a clone that was infected in some way. So we have given up on that, and we just pheno hunt and we breed on our own.
My first 5 years, I grew from seed, and I had got a healthy clone. So I never had any problems with powdery mildew until I got a clone from, not to hate on the West Coast, but somewhere where there was powdery mildew. Because I'm not saying everywhere in the West Coast has it, but I ordered a clone from the West Coast, and then from that moment on, I was fighting powdery mildew for 5 years straight.
Yep.
The beauty in that is the lesson I learned how to. It took me 5 years to learn how to. Now I'm I got you. Powdery mildew. Now for the last 2.5 years, I haven't had a speck of powdery mildew. But it took me 5 years of learning how to excuse me. That's such a dirty mouth. But yeah, sometimes the life makes you want to just swear sometimes. But it taught me. See, the thing with these tragic moments is once you conquer it, you're way better. You feel like you have graduated to another level of growing, because it's those failures that that when you learn how to do it, that's what makes you a better grower than you was when you had no mistakes, when it was just follow the books and everything should go smooth. Now, it's when you make those mistakes and you figure out how to fix it, that's when you could say, oh, I think I'm learning this thing a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Or when you get paranoid enough to where you don't, you know what I mean?
You can't even
you-
sleep.
You know,
You're like, I'm
like,
like,
I'm
no,
never
I gotta
gonna let
figure
that
this
happen
out,
again.
right?
I can never let that happen again.
And you're, what's that thing when you're like,
Anxiety.
when you OCD.
Yeah, right, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
OCD,
exactly. You get
yeah,
OCD,
obsessive
right.
compulsive
You get borderline OCD on certain things where it's like I'll wake up like at 2 a.m, like my spidey senses are saying, go check the room, and all of a sudden I'll be right. It'll be like, yo, it's 60. I gotta just die. You know what I mean? Something just tells you. Or sometimes I go down there and everything is perfect, and I'm like, damn, Tony, you bugging.
And I would say with somebody who does organic living soil, that there's no perfect grow. It's a balanced grow.
Yep.
Is the best thing you can hope for.
Balance is
And for a pest to take over, there has to be a plant that's acceptable,
Yep.
a pest present, and then favorable conditions. And if you have all three of those, you can almost guarantee you're gonna end up with problems. And the more of those things you can kind of eliminate, you can, again, get back to that balance in the center. Optimal health.
Homeostasis,
Yeah.
for sure.
Right.
You got a question? Okay.
So the question that I had was, what's the benefits from growing indoor versus outdoor? And then, are you guys working in any way to innovate like new ideas and tech to create indoor conditions outdoor?
Indoor conditions, outdoors?
So there's sealed greenhouses.
Greenhouses.
And then there's year-round greenhouses. They're a lot more money per square foot, and a significant amount of tech goes into ensuring that you maintain your temperature, airflows, and all that kind of stuff. But it's a long-term game. It's not a short-term game. So over time, it may be worthwhile. And there's no advantage of indoor versus greenhouse versus outdoor inherently. It's really about how do you scale? What are your systems? What are your inputs costing you? What is it costing you to produce per pound? And so indoors, you're paying all electricity. You know what I mean? So outdoors, very little electricity. And greenhouses, a mix of natural sunlight, possibly some supplemental light, and then other systems that you're using to make sure that your systems are balanced. And so there's not kind of the reason why we had a little bit deeper discussion is because there's not one answer that's a silver bullet for all the things to get the ultimate quality at the cheapest price and the least amount of work. It's all the trade-off of like what are you willing to do and able to do, or how do you want to use your resources, and then how do you spread them out to get balance.
Pretty much.
Oh, boy.
That was a lot of it.
My name is Anthony Showens, and I'm from the Black Farmers United from New York. And I had a question. At what point did you guys realize that you had a product that you could bring to market? And like, what were kind of like quick steps how you was able to maneuver that product?
Well, for me, I started when sour diesel was like 8,000 a pound in 04, 05. That's what made me say when my brother-in-law said, I got 2 lights, and the book said with 2 lights, if you do 1 gram per watt, 1,000 watts, that's like 2.5, maybe 3 pounds at minimum. So I was like, 8,000 a pound, I could get $30,000 perhaps with 2 lights and So that's when it makes me jump into the game right there. And I didn't even have the real sour diesel. I had something like sour diesel. It was sour kush. And it was the writer was like, it smells exactly like sour diesel if you don't know what you're looking for. So my first crop, it was smelling like, I never smelled I never smelled growing weed. So it was like kind of fruity to me throughout the whole thing. So I was nervous, paranoid, like I'm getting ready to do all this work for all this months, and this thing isn't even really sour. I bagged it up, met my boy at this little lounge, and as soon as I walked in the door, somebody passed me by, because they didn't have the smell-proof bag, so I had a little Ziploc. They was like, somebody got that sour. And I was like, got him. You know what I'm saying? And that was the beginning of, my thing personally, what brought me into the game. Eventually I did get the real sour like a year later, but that put me in the game right there. If that was the question. I don't know, was that the question you asked me? Oh, okay.
When he had the hot strain, right?
Yeah, when I had the hype strain, like,
Right.
but whoa, it wasn't even hype.
Hot, I said.
It wasn't.
If you know, you know.
It was one of those. It was like the upper echelon. Everybody was smoking haze back in the streets. It was not even sour. Like only a few people who had the money that the smoker wanted to buy that. Not the dealer. I was selling to the smoker at the time, so he was willing to pay $600 for that ounce.
And dealers were getting the smoker price.
Right, exactly. So it was
Like, there was no breaks.
There was no breaks.
Right.
This is my number. I'm standing on it. They'll leave with an attitude. Yo, I'll get it over there, and then come back like phone be ringing like 2 days later. All right, man, I'm gonna get it. Yeah, all right. You know what I'm saying? That lasted like about 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden, when everybody else started having the same strain, I could get that from down the street for $5.50. Now I got to lower mine for $5.50. I could get it for $4.50. Now I could get it for $150. It's like, so that's another reason why that taught me to like go find your own, curate your own strains, make sure you know your audience, the audience that likes to smoke the way you like to smoke, and know your worth. And you'll it's not gonna be easy, but if you tapped in and you're known for high quality weed, and you know your audience isn't the guy that wanna break your weed down and double it, make a flip off of your weed, and he just wants to smoke good. It's like somebody wants to buy a bottle of Ace of Spade versus a bottle of Hennessy. Like today, I'm gonna spend my money on some champagne. That's the mind frame when you're selling any quality product, you know what I mean? Even though, right now the weed business is volatile, but as it stabilizes, like liquor, you're gonna be able to separate the champagne from the Hennessy. It's just, you gotta know your audience. You gotta market and make your, you know what I mean?
Hi.
I think I said it right.
I have 2 questions. My first question is, so for someone that wants to learn how to grow, right, the cultivation process, where do you guys recommend for someone to go and learn all of those skills?
YouTube.
Grow weed easy.
And I told you I was doing a program, so you can just talk to me. So women, you know what I'm saying? So there's that.
So the other
Or
question.
meet a grower. Meet another grower.
Yeah, yeah, because they all together.
Me, I was like I said, I started with a rinky-dink book, and I wish YouTube was out when I first started. There's really good professional growers that's like showing you how to plant a seed, cut a clone, hunt, breed even. Like if you know who to follow, you know what I mean?
But there's also some hype out there.
And there's some people that's acting like they know what they doing on YouTube too. But you use your discernment. If you you read the comments. If everybody's like, these are the guys, you know what I mean? Or you can get some. It's like how you temperature check each other. You could temperature check somebody like this guy knows what he's doing, or this guy sounds like he's trying to know what he's doing. And the proof, and then you can learn from, like she said, use all your surroundings. I wish I had the outlets that's available today when I first started. I would be probably in outer space somewhere smoking a
One
blunt.
quickly question, I'm sorry. So I don't know if it's the same with weed as it is with other plants when it's getting cultivated. People tend to patent the plant that they create and things of that nature. Is that the same with weed?
They're thinking about it, and there are definitely two sides to that, or a million sides to that coin. Because at the end of the day, you want to feel that like wellness is available to everybody. And at the end of the day, then there's been the 10 years that you spent perfecting this strain, and you want to get your props for it. So
You also right now federally, since it's federally illegal, you can't get a patent, you can't get IP on the strain. You go on the strain name, on clothing, on things that you can try to own related to that, but you can't, say, hey, I've got this genetics, right, and I want to patent this or say this is just mine, and you're not going to have any protections at the federal level yet.
Yeah.
The best way to patent your weed is don't give out your clone. When you make something new, your clone is just like your Kentucky Fried Chicken didn't give out their secret recipe until they turned it made $1 billion. Now, I heard it's on the market somewhere. I don't know. I heard it's on the website, but don't quote me on that.
I have a question. For what you said earlier about the clone and how it had powdered mildew. So are there devices now that can help someone starting out? So now you'll know, okay, no, this is powdered mildew, and I'm not going to mess with this clone.
I mean, it's powdery mildew is like a herpes. Like if the right conditions bring it out of it. Like you may not know you have a plant that has it until the room is too moist.
So is there a way to know beforehand? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, but I there's some technology I heard.
So you're not getting it right now. We not getting it. We not getting it.
Getting clean tissue culture clones is going to be the best way. Tissue culture is a way of kind of stripping a plant down to its kind of early genetic, makeup and taking out some of these diseases that it may have caught over time. As you mentioned, powdery mildew is out in the air in a lot of different places. So
it just
over
needs
time,
opportunity. It just needs an opportunity, and what you might have gotten also was a plant that was susceptible,
highly susceptible.
You know what I mean?
To it,
right.
Because the entire world is full of spores.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
right.
If you give an opportunity for powdery mildew to take hold, and you have a plant that's acceptable to it, and you have the right conditions, you are guaranteed to get it, wherever you got the plant at.
Right.
And so that's something to think about. But so there's clean plants. Tissue culture. So tissue culture is an aseptic environment where a plant is on a sugar agar, and so because of that, you can't have any spores, and it's done in a clean environment. But you're gonna have to take that plant out of that environment at some point. So what you want to do is grow a healthy plant that is more resistive to all of your environmental conditions, which means having a balanced environment, a balanced system, and that's gonna be your best bet. And you'll notice when things start to get out of balance as you have that back and forth with your plant.
There's no way to know before that?
You can get it tested, but you're not before you spend, not before you get money, not before you give them the money for the plant though.
So you can get it. You can get it tested. I mean, there's a lot of diseases that a plant is likely, especially the older that clone is. Like you think about it, cannabis plant is not meant to be living for years
20,
and years, right? It's supposed to be living for 1 year, and then it dies in the winter, and hopefully the seeds, it was able to catch some pollen and carry its generation on. And we are keeping these strains by cloning them 10, sometimes 20 years. And over that time, they become weaker. The genetics become more susceptible to all kinds of issues, or they pick up different diseases over that time. So the best way is to, if you're going to bring a clone in, to have it from a tissue culture lab so that you can at least be sure that it's been cleaned up to where it's not bringing all these diseases into you to start off with. As you mentioned, you can still get them later, but if you want to start off with a clean clone, absolutely the best way is to get it from a tissue culture source that you trust.
Great, thank you.
And if you want to have that non-hype, you grow weed from seed.
Yeah, grow it from seed, right? Yeah, don't take clones, grow it from seed. Yeah.
You talked about choosing your strains in advance. I mean, and I think for the compliant market, there's some challenges there. And could you talk through some of those things? Is compliance, how inhibitive is compliance to your business too?
So sometimes there's been some states where they say you have to bring in all your genetics during a certain small period when you first get your license. So therefore, if they don't allow for you to bring in new genetics afterwards, you're essentially stuck with the same genetics that you've had over this period of time, which year 2, year 3, you're done. So most of the states, Oregon had to lobby in order to allow us to accept seeds from anywhere else throughout that whole time, and we got that accepted. I'm not sure about other states, but if your state does not have the ability to bring in new genetics in a compliant way throughout your whole license period, then that's definitely going to put you at a massive disadvantage.
Unless you breed your own.
And some states don't even really allow breeding, and that's also not very conducive, because if you bring a male, if you've got your facility and the grower doesn't want any male pollen anywhere within a mile of that facility, and I've had that happen where you have hermaphrodite, what's the best term? Monoecious, yeah, that's not the best. Hermaphrodite's not, that's how we know it, right?
Yeah,
to where you get a male expression on what you thought was a female flower, and it'll seed your whole room with just a few different pollen sacs. So, breeding on site or anywhere, unless you have a facility that's, far away or whatnot, can be very, very risky and very dangerous.
I got a question about brands. What do you look for in a brand in terms of like working with them outside of just you pushing your own flower as a brand? Because there are other ways to sell cannabis without having a license. You can be, a brand. And what do you look for in like the brand and that would make you say I want to work with them?
Are they connected to the streets? You know what I mean? Are they connected to the influencers? It's not necessarily the Instagram influencers, but the street cannabis influencers, right? That is very, very difficult. You're seeing companies, MSOs that are opening up with all the money, but they don't have the brands, right? They realize they have to have the brands in order to actually move weed, in order to sell weed. So regardless of whether you have a license or not, if you've got a brand and you've got a network and you've got the ability to, you got the homies that you can pass around to and they're gonna talk about it, right? Then that to me matters more than a license in many ways, is because if you've got the right brand, you can move bud for someone and that's invaluable.
Some of those biggest national brands that people know is because they had a network of people who were known as that guy who pulls up.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you're that guy that pulls up at the spot and people are like, yo, that guy, like, that guy has a brand already. You know what I mean? Yep.
I think now, people are like, I think what is coming to, like influencers, people of high status and fame that love weed, like you can give them, like one of the things I was interested in doing is like trying to make certain strains just for them to market, where they could feel like this is their strain, where it's like nobody has this strain but me, because I know the grower and he grows, because that's how I saw like the Rents people. Those guys weren't growers, they just were the guys that marketed it behind the grower, who was a guy that nobody knew, who was like, you guys are hot, you guys are running around the street, this is your strain, and I'll only sell it to you, and you go out there and make it hot. And then that's how like certain brands became hot, because of those influence like that he just described, with no license. So, there's other people like that coming out the woodworks every day, but you got to be in touch with who's who and what's what. And it's not easy, but it can be once you're plugged in. It's like if you're outside the loop, it's gonna be hell to get in that loop. But once you're in the loop, your phone is gonna start ringing. Yo, could you make me a cut? I know my man, he got his own strain and he got 1 million followers and he's running around and he's got a new single about to drop, and now you can start negotiating and building and being known for that guy that makes strains for different influencers, so to speak. But you gotta know what the people want, you know what I mean? You gotta know your audience, so to speak. So yeah, that's it.
Me, as a brand, I deal with other brands based on how they do their grow and what their ethics are. So I don't really care so much how big of a brand. When I deal with whether I'm going to be working, doing a limited time offering, or if I'm doing consulting, anything where my name is going to be involved in it, to me, it comes down to the ethics of the people involved, the reason why they're involved in cannabis, and then the kind of weed they grow. Because there's all kinds of people who grow some amazing weed, and they're just assholes. You know what I'm saying? And then you just think, if you were nicer, imagine what kind of good weed you would be making. Your energy would be even nicer, you know? Right. So I think that part is a really important, and to speak with, to the fact that MSOs made mad problems because they didn't understand the culture of cannabis. It was really all about money. So they could hop all over the country, whatever, but until they decide to put their feet really in the roots of the situation and really have those key relationships with not just the Instagram influencer. I hate when people call me an influencer. I'm just like, young, do you know how much I've ever written about hash? You know what I'm saying? I hate that because to me, it just has a connotation of just someone who just happens to be smoking on the internet, as opposed to making things happen. A lot of times it is the person that you don't know. They might have 200 followers on Instagram, but you know what I'm saying? They're the people that really know what's up. Those are the people who know the music when it's early and stuff like that. So I think that as much as brands themselves need to work on their narrative, because you can't just put out good weed and that's just be it. Because if there's no story involved, understand that from a business standpoint, people don't only buy with the logic, they buy with the emotion. And the emotion comes from relating to a story. So when you have brand matchups that don't relate to each other, and you're just wondering, how did they end up matching up with this one, and bringing both the brands down in terms of their authenticity, you know what I'm saying, and integrity.
Absolutely.
That's where it comes down to authenticity and integrity. And that covers love of the plant, spending the time learning the science of the plant, being humble enough to improve oneself on the plant, and want to work within the community that in which the plant exists. No solo for dolos on this one.
I think you just described the difference between the industry and the culture.
And the culture, right there.
You know what I mean? There's the cannabis industry and there's the cannabis culture. What she was just describing was the culture. And those are the people that's gonna be deeply rooted for the long haul. The industry, they might be a fad here and there, you know what I mean? But they're gonna come, fads come and go. Industry is classic, and I'm trying to stay classic. I don't know about everybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Also, I would say that brands are about experience and giving people a good experience every time. And it's that consistency that actually really makes a brand. That every time I see that logo and that label, that my Friday night just got better.
Right.
And, with the industry versus the culture, people that are in the cannabis culture and from the cannabis culture, were doing this before it was legal.
Yep.
When they were risking everything.
And most of the smokers as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The people who were,
part of the culture.
In our retail, in our dispensary,
Yeah.
it's like the 80-20 rule. 80% of your product is purchased by 20% of the people. And those are people who are highly discerning, people who, have been smoking for years before it was legal. And they understand that, right? So if you're not speaking to those people, then you're leaving a lot on the table.
Okay, I have one more question. Well, it's kind of like two. How do you see cannabis being grown in an ethical way? And also, do you see it being rotated like other crops? So that, how we rotate other crops to give
keep
the
the
soil
soil
a rest and stuff?
healing.
Do you see cannabis being processed in that way so that we're not abusing the soil or
Cannabis
abusing
doesn't do
cannabis?
that. That's one of the things that's fantastic about cannabis. Cannabis doesn't do that. Just mulch that bad boy back in. Unless you do no-till.
And people are doing regenerative farming.
Yes, regenerative
and
farming.
there's a huge movement in regenerative farming and cannabis and sustainability for cannabis. Whether you're growing across all of the different grow classes, whether indoor, greenhouse, or outdoor. So I think that we probably have a community that inside of the industry and industrial practices have every intention of doing the best things we can for the environment due to the nature of the culture that we come from.
I recommend everybody who grows in soil to use biochar.
Yeah.
Because it's good for not only the plant to keep the plant growing at tip-top shape, and keeps the soil, it protects and houses the beneficials that need to stay in the soil at all time, but it also extracts CO2 out of the air, which is also good for the planet. So it's just, I'm just telling everybody that I know, I just started practicing it this year, and it's just, that's another thing that's just changing my outlook on like the world, you know what I mean? Like we putting too much CO2 in the world when there's natural things that we could be using to take it, you know, to put some balance in the world and give our plants more health and nutrients. You know what I'm saying? It locks the nutrients in the soil and holds it for when the plants need it without leaching it out into the rivers and, you know, killing the lakes and the ponds and stuff like that. So
I love that, Tone. Just to speak to what you were saying, so I grew hemp, and it's like a soil remediator when you grow hemp. And to speak to that biochar, I have tons of biochar on my farm where I'm doing, it's hemp biochar that we grew, and we're doing a project where we're mixing it with manure, because the USDA will pay you per acre by putting biochar on your farm. So it's funny you say that, and I have plenty of biochar.
I'll take some off your hands.
Yeah. and then if you do a comparison, if you grow a plant using the biochar and compare it to a regular just soil, even if it's living soil, you see the difference in comparisons and what it does to your plants. Amazing, and we don't talk about it enough. So I would love to, you know, talk to anybody that's interested in getting hemp biochar, because I have plenty of it.
Coming right at you.
Annette has been waiting forever. Annette.
I think maybe this will be our last question. We've been
Okay, but she's been waiting for a long
No,
time.
yeah.
Get into the sustainability conversation because we haven't talked a lot about that, and sustainability is part of the regulations in New York. It's part of packaging. It's part of cultivation and processing. So can any of you talk to sustainability? Jesce, because you have compliance for that, maybe you can.
Yeah, certainly. So my background before getting into cannabis, I did a lot of certified energy management work, going around to different industrial facilities across the country and figuring out ways for them to reduce their carbon footprint. And, you know, when getting into the cannabis industry, you see a lot of opportunity for that. You know, in many different ways, and how people are cultivating and using energy, different plastics that are, you know, out there that are not really reusable or not, you know, a lot of times as recyclable as people might think. And, you know, there's an organization called Resource Innovation Institute, and I was on the board for about 6 years. Someone back here knows about it. And they're absolutely the leading organization in the country for sustainability and controlled environment agriculture. Started with cannabis and now moving to other fruits and vegetables that are grown indoors and microgreens. So there's, you know, amazing opportunity for it. It's extremely important. I think the consumer doesn't quite understand how to apply a value to that, right? They go to the store, they don't know whether that was, you know, grown with this amount of electricity or that amount of electricity. They don't quite know what those scores or how carbon neutral these companies are, but they will eventually, right? As we're trying to figure out how to differentiate these companies, we have to be thinking about how we're growing in ways that are reducing the amount of water. A lot of people think cannabis is a very water intensive plant. It's not. Cannabis actually uses less water than many other fruits and vegetables that are grown. So we got to also think about it in the right framework. But how can we reduce water? We will reuse our dehumidified water and our all of our condensate water, and we'll filter it back into our system. There's people who are reusing all of their water, their runoff water, everything within their facilities. How are we growing and using less energy efficient HVAC, energy efficient lights, moving as much as we can to LED and you know, where it makes sense in your growing process. The amount of waste that we're generating with either you know, general trash or plant waste that's not being composted in the right way, or the amount of waste that we're generating in the different plastics at grow facilities, but also that are being used in consumer packaged goods. Those are the areas where I think there's the most low-hanging fruit to make the industry more sustainable. And I think as companies, maybe they don't think how important it is right now, but absolutely, just like deciding what you're growing, you better be thinking about that before it's a problem. With sustainability, you better be thinking about that before, you know, carbon scores are coming out, right? Or before people are talking about it and people are differentiating on that, you better have some things to talk about in your facility and in your system and in your supply chain right now.
Yeah, no, it's really, I mean, it's like trillions of dollars in the ESG market that's coming, so that's the market share out there. And then the other piece is that there are studies that say consumers will be less resistant to ticket prices on sustainable companies. So you can charge up to 46% more at retail if you're sustainable. So it's really important to be forward thinking because you're meeting regulations, but you're also going to be leaning into knowing your customer and who's your market.
And some states are regulating, they're requiring different things. They're requiring reporting on your energy, on your water. They're requiring LEDs. They're requiring a certain amount of wattage per square foot. So it's definitely, there's a lot of consumer push, or there will be more consumer push, but it's also from the other end, from a regulatory standpoint. Many regulating agencies are doing a lot more and will continue to.
Yeah, in New York State, we have to do an energy audit and a benchmark with the licensees, adult use licensed growers. So they're required, and then we have to write a sustainability plan with our SOPs as well. Standard orders and procedures. All that stuff is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I do a quick shout out?
Sure.
So just so that you know, Cornell University, the USDA has germplasm, and the germplasm is all at Cornell University. It's free to the public because it was your tax dollars that got that. And the USDA gave us that.
Germplasm.
Seeds, genetic, germplasm.
Oh, sorry.
Seeds.
Seeds.
Oh, seeds.
I'm like, oh my God, this is random things we got. Ooh, we got something.
I don't want no Cornell seeds.
So we have been doing trials since 2016 when the Farm Bill came out, and we know
Keep them
the
seeds.
cultivars that are
Exactly.
resistant to all these things, and you can get the seed for free.
I don't think the average person knows that at all.
Wait, what kind of seeds?
They're just giving out powdery mildew resistant seeds. You get a seed, you get a seed.
But what kind of seeds?
Hemp fiber.
Cannabis seeds, but some are hemp, some are CBD, some are THC, but they have the entire like catalog that they use from the USDA.
Bring us home some seeds.
I'll drive up there. Yeah.
So just Cornell donated my first hemp grow.
Nice. Nice.
There you go.
Yeah, so Cornell has been, Larry Smart has been really, really good.
That's excellent.
For my whole cannabis project.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where I work. So.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
one
That's good to know.
I just wanted to introduce Ms. Horton from No Labs and Compound.
Oh, that's compound?
Genetics? You see, everybody was like, what, compound genetics?
Yo.
I want those seeds.
See, name recognition right there. You see the brand?
Yeah, I want those seeds for sure.
Compound.
Yeah, I was like, wait, really?
She can tell you more about it, but I've been
I think they
speaking with
was
Dan for some time based on what they do with tissue culture and just working with them directly and getting their genetics in the New York market and making sure that we get good quality genetics here in New York.
Oh, let me find out.
I'm extremely honored. Thank you so much. We're very excited about the New York market, obviously. And speaking of PM-resistant germplasm, we have the largest genetic library of tissue culture and cannabis in the world that's fully vetted and verified. And we're very interested in extending more partnerships, especially with the Harlem Business Alliance and the communities here. So please reach out to me, and we'd love to better support getting good, strong, clean genetics into New York and promoting your guys' businesses. So
How does that work?
I think we're at the point
I'm
where
Lauren. Yeah, you guys
we can
can.
wrap?
I don't want to take away from what you're
Talk about
doing,
wrap.
but obviously the New York market is really strong, really thriving, and so a lot of ways for you guys to benefit from what everyone globally is doing, and so we can be that conduit.
They coming up.
Back on the call.
The plug.
I want to thank everybody here. Thank you.
Alrighty.